It is 7:01 p.m. here in Sharm El Sheikh on Tuesday, November 15th, 9:01 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and just afternoon in Ottawa. Hi there, Ahlan wa Sahlan. My name is Jude Krasta, and I lead the Cities and Climate Initiative at the Morris J. Wosk Center for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. I'm your host for our series of virtual briefings throughout COP27 here in Sharm El Sheikh, Egypt. We are coming to you live during a very lively, fast-paced, and toasty second week at the conference. It's quite a contrast from snowy Vancouver and some of the pictures of Tofino turning into a wintry wonderland. But before we begin today's briefing, we would like to acknowledge that the Simon Fraser University Morris J. Wosk Center for Dialogue is housed at the Vancouver campus of SFU, which is situated on the ancestral and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to be with us here today, wherever you are, and we are very excited to be joined by two delegates on the ground here in Egypt, Dugan O'Neill and Shea O'Neill. Quite a coincidence for those who weren't listening to our previous conversation, no relation at all. But it is O'Neill Day at COP27, so we thought we'd honor that by having two O'Neills join our panel. We're joined today by Dugan, who is the Vice President, Research and International at Simon Fraser University. As SFU's Vice President, Research and International, he leads the strategic research initiatives and facilitates international opportunities that foster research collaborations and student exchange. This collaborative role allows for an interplay between research and innovation to enhance social, economic, and environmental well-being. Thanks for joining us, Dugan. We're also joined today by Shea O'Neill. Shea works with the Covenant of Mayors for Sub-Saharan Africa, and which strengthens the role that local governments and municipalities can play in addressing both environmental and development goals. The organization is a major catalyst for local climate action in the region, with political commitment from over 250 local governments. Thank you for joining us both.
Thanks, Jude.
Thanks, Jude.
So let's get started with the big picture for everybody. We did this last time on November 11th when we had our briefing. What have been the highlights of the conference for each of you so far? Dugan.
Well, this is my first COP. So the first impression of COP is that it is an amazing circus of activity. And so I was thinking about it today. It feels like it's 4 or 5 different conferences superimposed. And so one of the highlights is just trying to navigate this and find all of the interesting things that are happening and experience them. So that's, you know, a non-content related highlight. The content related highlight, I spent today in energy sessions. This was Energy Day, not really O'Neill Day. It was Energy Day, and so I spent my day in energy sessions led by Egypt, and so got to see a lot of African perspectives throughout the day on green energy and the shift to renewable energy in Africa, which was very interesting.
Yeah, and Shea?
Yeah, I can definitely agree that it's a bit of a maze to navigate COP. This is my 3rd COP, so I have a bit of experience, but I think it's always different depending on the setup. But yes, I'm here in a different capacity than I have been in previous years, maybe, and I'm working with African mayors from Sub-Saharan Africa specifically. And we brought 10 of them to COP. And I think a highlight for me has been seeing them really shine this week and participating in many different panels, bringing examples from their local governments, explaining what the reality is like on the ground. And even just now, I was talking to one of the mayors who spoke at a panel this afternoon, where it was mostly, I'd say, from the Global North audience and other panelists. And he was saying to me, you know, it's very different than anything I've ever done before. And I said, well, yeah, because a lot of these people maybe haven't heard from a perspective from a city in Africa and the types of challenges you face and what you're dealing with. So it's a bit different than attending a conference and speaking to people who are in the same reality as you. So that's quite quite an interesting aspect of what we're doing. And we actually had a meeting last night with these 10 mayors who we brought. They're on our leadership board of the Covenant of Mayors. And they met last night and they came up with a statement that they want to promote coming out of COP within an hour of being together in one room, which was also really amazing. And I think also proves that sometimes being together in person can really make a difference when you have colleagues all across the continent. You can really get things done when you're in the same place, as much as it's hard to have brought everyone to Egypt.
Right. So actually, let's follow along that thread. You said there are these meetings taking place. There are these statements being made. What are some of those main priorities for cities and regions in Africa that you're working with at these discussions at COP?
Yeah, so I think particularly topical for this COP is the topic of loss and damage. We know that this is something that's being discussed in the negotiations, and it's something that national governments are discussing, but it's also something that we've been discussing at the local level. So how can cities be more involved in these conversations on loss and damage? They're, especially African cities and mayors, they're the ones who are on the front lines of the impacts of climate change. They're dealing with impacts to their infrastructure, to their communities. And so how, when we're thinking about loss and damage funding, can we make sure that there's funding specifically allocated that goes to cities instead of just to national governments? Because we know it often doesn't trickle down as much as we hope it would to the city level projects. So I think that's something particularly unique for this COP, because we haven't really talked about this at a city level in my experience before. But definitely more broadly, the topic of adaptation in Africa is critical, and also access to energy, because a lot of the African population currently doesn't have access to energy. So that's something that the African cities are really pushing as well at this COP.
Mm-hmm. And then Dugan, looking at some of the conversations you were attending today for Energy Day, but also from your perspective as a research institution representative, how are you finding value, or how do you think you might find value moving forward in the conference at these discussions so that research institutions can play a role here?
So yeah, research institutions, I think, have a lot to offer, but need to hear the perspectives, the kinds of perspectives that Shea was talking about. The environment in Vancouver, or the work that we do with communities in Canada, may not be the same as work that needs to be done in other parts of the world. And so seeing the issues that limit the ability for the research that's being done to actually have an effect on the ground, and financing was definitely a theme that ran through the day today in the Energy Day as well. And so how do you, what are innovative financing schemes that can invest money, can lead to investment of money and investment in new infrastructure in Africa, to allow some of the transitions that are needed to be made so that people have access to energy. And there were lots of discussions today around cooking, the number of people who don't have access to clean energy sources for cooking in Africa, and what are the alternatives for things like that are affordable and simple, and don't, it's not artificial intelligence powered skip the dishes drones dropping things down. That wouldn't be the right solution. So I think that there's there could be, and I don't think that most researchers aren't like this, but there could be a tendency to do research in isolation, to think about, or to not do it in isolation, but think about the community right beside you, and not think about the challenges that thing that you're creating. And it doesn't have to be a technology, it could be a social policy, how that would apply in other regions with other kinds of challenges. And some of the panels I saw today really had a diverse set of people from different parts of the world discussing those challenges from different perspectives. And so translating a piece of research work into something that's useful, useful broadly, it can be eye-opening at a conference like this.
Right, and I'll pick that up back in a minute, but let's look at the cities and regions as a whole. Even when we're looking at it from a Canadian side, as we're working on it. Yesterday, we had the Cities and Climate Initiative host an event focused on those international perspectives with multi-level climate action. We had a panel with folks from all over the world, and took a look at what were the similarities, differences, even for NGO organizations working on the ground. How do you see cities and regions in each of your perspectives playing a further role in climate action, whether it's at this COP or moving forward after that, Shea?
Yeah, I think, cities and regions are essential to climate action. It's where you have the closest impact to the communities. You have the first-hand view of what's happening on the ground in your city, the impacts, the challenges. I think cities have to be involved in the solutions. It's really not a question, but it's how do we get cities to be recognized on that level, and I think it is happening. I've even noticed from the past couple of years, cities are more involved in kind of the more formal side of COP. Often cities will have a few speaking slots in different negotiations, and some of the high-level ministerial sessions, which I think didn't happen 5 years ago or 10 years ago, definitely. So it's definitely starting to be realized as a more important key player on the international scale. But organizations like GCOM, Covenant of Sub-Saharan Africa, the regional chapter, ICLE, C40 are also really helping these cities elevate their voices to the national and global level and see how they can work more collaboratively. I know that GCOM launched playbook today on multi-level climate action, which specifically talks about this, how to engage cities more with national governments and work together on climate action. But I really do think that it's essential if we want to see action happening on the ground and really have a positive impact on our communities.
And so just following in on that, when we're looking at the direct city to city or region to region relationship across the world, in your view, how do you think Canadian cities, regions, and like civil societies within Canada who work at that level could work with counterparts in Sub-Saharan Africa in that knowledge exchange or to co-address mitigation and adaptation challenges?
Yeah, that's a key part of what we're doing at COMSA. One of our 3 priorities is to encourage city-to-city exchange and to hear directly from cities that this is one of the most beneficial things that they see, is when they get the chance to talk to other cities about really concrete projects and solutions to the challenges they're facing. It's really helpful. And often cities, even if they're in different parts of the world, they are facing similar challenges. Although it might be a different context, it is often kind of the same core issues that they're dealing with, and exchanging on that level can be really helpful. And I knew I was coming on this call, and I was just sitting with the mayor, and he was asking me, do you think, because he knows I'm from Vancouver and I used to work for the city, he was asking me, can you put me in touch with someone within a city in Canada so I can talk to them about different issues? And I said to him, okay, I'm going to go on this call. So tell me exactly what you want to talk to someone about, and we'll see if there's anyone on the call who's interested. And for him, it's quite specific. He's from Cameroon and a city called Garoua, and he's really interested in looking at access to clean water in communities that are dealing with extreme poverty as well, which is a very specific issue, but maybe there are some communities in Canada who are also dealing with this. We know that not all areas of Canada even have access to clean water, so maybe this is a bit of a call for my friends in Gaurawa. If anyone has any suggestions for him, but I think I'm always open. I mean, I don't know, you can message me on LinkedIn for anyone who works at a city to find connections between these cities globally. I think it's a really great experience. Both cities can learn a lot, and that's something we really want to stress working with African cities, is that it's not just them learning from cities in the global north. It should be a mutual exchange and not imposing ideas from Europe or North America, but really having an exchange on what solutions worked in both regions and how they can work together to learn and fight climate change globally.
Well, that's a pretty cool call to action you put down there. And seeing some of the folks who joined us on the call, I know that there are folks who work within cities that might be interested, and our stakeholder network is definitely one that we can probably find some people to make those connections, either in this situation or in others. Going to you, Dugan, when you have Canadian research institutions like SFU, what do these universities have to offer in moving these discussions beyond the pledges and the accords and into things like kind of like what we were just talking about, like concrete actions, the stock taking, and the solutions innovation?
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit that universities like ours have to offer. So in fact, our approach at Simon Fraser University to climate action is called community-centered climate innovation. And so recognizing that community to community, the challenges are different, the resources available to meet the challenges are different, and that we have to engage with those communities to understand what the problems are and how they can be best solved in the best interests of the citizens of that community. And so in terms of what we can offer, there aren't very many institutions in the world where we have economists and urban planners working for the same organization that's got engineers and chemists and mathematicians and historians all working side by side, and quite often separately, so side by side in terms of geographically on the same campus, but not necessarily knitting that work together. But there are challenges that communities face that really require a multidisciplinary perspective.
Right.
And it tends to be that we have the ability to assemble a multidisciplinary group that can address that problem. And for the most part, people are in their jobs that they're in at universities because they're passionate about that topic. The topic you're asking them, you're presenting them probably with a challenge, probably with data about that challenge, and they would love to engage with that challenge, to have the question, the hard question that they're supposed to answer, and to have a real life community to work with to solve the challenge. And combine that with the fact that you could bring together 4 or 5 of them looking at different aspects of the challenge. And I think there's a lot to offer. The hard part is getting it all organized, figuring out who to talk to in a university or who to talk to in a city, getting them together, getting clear statements of what the problem is and what parts can be addressed by the university, because it won't always be all of it. Mm-hmm. And so there's some kind of overhead with that kind of collaboration, but when you make it work, I think it's very productive, and the community benefits and the university benefits as well.
Right. And so just to continue with you, but this is a question for both of you eventually. What then in all of these discussions is missing for you? What should we be talking about more? What's not being talked about enough? Or what was being talked about before, but has taken sort of a backseat this time? And of course, Dugan, I know this is your first COP, so the previous COPs may not be a context, but even within the field of climate research and just climate action in general.
So, as you said, my first COP, a couple of days in, I think I was surprised by the breadth of things that are being covered, and so I didn't come in and think, there's clearly some voices missing. Maybe there are, but I have heard lots of different voices from lots of different parts of the world, in many different types of backgrounds, even in just a couple of days at COP. And so I think voices are being heard. I think this is a bit of a different COP from last year. From my understanding, this is an implementation focused COP and not like a goal setting kind of COP. And so the goals are different. And so I can't really judge it against previous COPs. And so far, and Shea, having been to 3 of them, may have a more insight. But so far, I've been impressed with the diversity and types of conversation that I've been around since I've been here.
And Shea, that's a great segue to you.
Yeah, I think there's kind of 2 sides to COP, which people know if you've been. You have this world of the side events, which I've mostly been engaged in. And then you have what's going on behind the scenes in the actual negotiations. So I would say from the side events perspective, even though we're in the blue zone, it's still side events happening on the side of the actual purpose of COP, the negotiations. And there, I think you do see a lot of diversity and different voices. But I wonder how many of these are being actually integrated into the real conversations and decision making, and the negotiation side. I know I've heard from a few people that it could be improved in the future, but also we know that things aren't only just happening there. Deals and decisions and commitments between different actors are also being made at these different events. So I do think there could be maybe more inclusion of different voices, including the local level in the real heart of the negotiation side. But you do see that a lot in this.
I think Shea, you're just frozen.
And I don't want to count that, but maybe that's something. Hello.
Can you hear us? You were just frozen there for a little bit.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. If you just want to repeat the last little part, it cut out.
Yeah, that's something that I think could maybe be improved for future COPs, but it's not something that's happened before. So I think we are generally in the right direction, but including more the voices of definitely local governments in that real heart of the negotiation side of COP, and different types of actors on that side. And that would be very interesting, I think, going forward.
Perfect. And we're just in our last couple of minutes here for the briefing. Before we go, I want to get a sense from you both, looking ahead for the rest of the conference, what's on your schedules, and for some of the work that you might be taking back after this conference for post-COP reflections. What highlights or outcomes are you looking to prioritize, or what are you watching out for you to say, okay, I got something out of this. This makes sense for me to take back and actually work on moving forward. Dugan, let's start with you.
So in terms of my schedule for the rest of my time, I think tomorrow is Biodiversity Day. So I'm going to be going around catching biodiversity related events and side events. In terms of what I would like to take home, opportunities for partnership. And so, for example, on the bus last night, I ran into a fellow who we had a great discussion about green hydrogen and the potential in his country. And we exchanged cards. He's going to put me in touch with the vice chancellor of his university, and we're going to talk about things we could do together, because they're making huge investments in building new facilities there to support a hydrogen economy. Maybe we have an opportunity to become partners. And so that was, that kind of thing happens when you're in person. It doesn't happen when you meet people by Zoom. And so sometimes it's good just to take the bus and seek out those kinds of collisions.
I mean, it's one of those things where often I go back and forth about like hybrid, fully online versus in person, all of that. And for all the merits and drawbacks of each, it's like you hear stories about scenarios like that where it's like, how do you think to Zoom or Slack in a bus, right? And then you might meet somebody in those unstructured conversations. Shea, looking to you, what are some of the things you're looking forward to in the next couple of days and after?
Yeah, so we have on Thursday our main key event. It's the Solutions Day, so a lot of cities have taken that as the Cities Day as well. And so we have our event. It's focused on, like I was saying, loss and damage at the local level, specifically in Sub-Saharan Africa. And so we have a few experts and mayors on that panel, which I think will be really interesting. And I think that morning also is a ministerial focus specifically on urban climate action, which will be good to see the outcomes of that. And overall, Thursday, I think, will be a really big day for local climate action. And as far as what I'm taking away, I'm here really supporting the mayors, which has been great. And I will kind of take lead from them on what they would like to see in coming out of this COP. But I think, as Dugan mentioned earlier, finance is always what it comes down to in a lot of cases for local level climate action. And it's always something that we're thinking about. So coming out of COPs like this, when the mayors go back to their cities, they're going to be asked, what did you accomplish? Or did you find us funding for this project? What are you bringing back to the community? And that's always a question that we have to answer to. And it's something that we will continue to push on, is how do we mobilize finance for local climate action, and specifically on adaptation projects, because this isn't as easy to fund for cities. So that's something we'll really be focused on over the next year. How can we find innovative solutions, working with private sector, working with different levels of government, working with researchers and universities. I think it really will take a all team on board approach to solve these challenges. So that will be something that we're really focused on for the coming months coming out of COP27.
Perfect. And with that, we have a couple of calls to action here. We have examples of the types of unstructured conversations that take place and the opportunities for partnerships. We have a lot of exciting things coming up, a lot of exciting things that are taking place in week 1 and week 2. And in many ways, depending on who you speak to at this conference, there is so much highlights and lowlights at the same time, and learning opportunities for moving forward. With that, I'd like to thank you both for your time with us here today. Dugan, Shea, good luck for the rest of week 2 here in Sharm. Folks, we are now, as I mentioned, in the middle of week 2 here in Africa at COP27. As we were just discussing, today was ACE and Civil Society Day and Energy Day. Tomorrow is Biodiversity Day, and November 17th is Solutions Day, which, given that multi-level climate action was mentioned by the Egyptian presidency, just as Shea said, it's the Cities and Regions Day, so which has that focus on sustainable cities moving forward in that vertical integration of nationally determined contributions. So keep an eye out for updates that are flowing out from the conference as we proceed through our social channels. We look forward to having you join us at the next virtual briefing, which would be after the conference on November 24th for a post-COP reflection. We'll have more details about that and potentially a slightly larger panel to get those perspectives to you on the road forward for Canadian multi-level climate action. You can follow our updates at citiesandclimate.ca/COP27, or as I mentioned, on our social media channels through the SFU Center for Dialogue. Wherever you are across the globe, we thank you for joining us on this Tuesday. And if you're seeing this in a post recording, thanks for checking it out. This is being recorded and will be posted on citiesandclimate.ca shortly. We hope to see you at the next one. Have a good evening for those who are tuning in from Egypt, and good morning to everybody in Vancouver. We'll see you on November 24th.